We often overperform because we're making up for something that we never actually faced. We're making up for a need that has actually never been addressed. So we have decided that the need is the issue, that whatever it is that's calling for our attention, whatever this pain is, has to be set aside or has to be, pushed away, or doesn't really require that much time, that much energy, that much effort, because we really haven't faced what is driving the need, what is behind our efforts, what's behind the way that we work, what's behind all of our striving. Thank you for joining me again for the Girl Just Feel podcast, where faith meets mental health and healing starts with feeling your feelings. I'm your host, Dr. Ajane Gaylord, and I would love if you would subscribe and share the podcast. I've been enjoying meeting you here, sharing my heart, and I hope that you have been enjoying being here too. Where have you ignored what you actually need and called it strength? When was the last time you paid attention to what you actually needed? What that looks like is all of these things we've come up with to look busy and active and productive and acceptable, but not to say that it's wrong with being productive, not to say that it's wrong to take care of your people. This is what we should do. The issue is that we're doing all the things in a detrimental way that is costing us more than just our time and energy. It oftentimes is costing us our mental wellness, our health. We're doing it in a way where we're not integrated. We have compartmentalized who we are. So we've decided that our emotions and our wellness and our mental health needs to be in a category over here. All the work that we do and all the people that we care for and all the relationships we have to be over here. Our faith and our trust in God has to be over here. Our work and the way that we earn income, like we've totally compartmentalized our lives. And so we're living disconnected, not just from everything around us, but even from within. We're disconnected from ourselves because we've relegated emotional wellness and healing and health to some other thing out there that we'll get around to when we have enough time, that we'll get around to when we have enough money or energy or capacity to deal. And so we'll push aside the very thing that's calling for our attention, that pain that I talked about, that we need to pay attention to what we need, and we will negate our very needs because it doesn't feel valid. It doesn't feel profitable. It doesn't feel worthy enough of our time, money, energy, and attention because we're spending so much of that in so many other places. Okay, so let me slow down. There was a season when my husband and I were looking for a home. We had purchased a two bedroom, one bath house when we first got married. Horrible purchase. Never should have bought that house, but that's neither here nor there. But that's the home that we had. We had our first two children in that home, and it got too small. We were, trying to do real estate, and I'll have to share some of those stories for later too. But we were failing at that and not being successful at that. And we got to a point where financially, we had made some poor decisions and we ended up compromised in our housing. I'll just say it that way. So we had to move out of that house and we had to go somewhere else. And at the time, I really wanted a home for my family because to me, I grew up in an environment that was loving. My mother was a single mother. I was there with my sisters. She cared for us. But there was also some things that I needed that I didn't receive when I was growing up. And I didn't realize that until probably a couple of years ago. But as I'm learning more about what pain actually is and how it actually shows up in our lives and what it's actually there for, um, I've come to discover that some of the things that I was searching for or doing was because I was trying to make up for what I felt like I didn't have. And I talked about this before, that we kind of define trauma as events that happen, that change who we are, but also trauma can be defined as things that we needed that did not happen. And we don't always look at trauma from that lens. But There were some things that happened where I didn't feel safe. I didn't know that my needs were going to be met. And I struggled and strived and worked really, really hard to make up for the fact that money was tight, or some of the things that I wanted or even needed weren't being supplied. So when I became an adult and I got my own family, I think I had this internal agreement with myself. I don't even know if it was a vow explicitly, but I think I had this internal agreement with myself that I would, for my family, for my children, for my husband, have a home and create this home environment that felt safe. And I remember us struggling for several years with stable housing. We didn't have a place to go. Thankfully, my mother did take my whole family back in with her for a season. She allowed us to live with her for a season. My sister-in-law too, and so we had family who supported us through that transition. But I remember being so fixated on fixing the issue, like for me, the solution to what I was feeling at the time, which was unsafe and unsecure in my housing. And also, I kind of felt a little bit like a failure as a mother and a wife, that I didn't have a home for my family. That for me, the solution was to fix the external circumstances, and that meant to find us a home. And that wasn't a bad pursuit. That wasn't wrong for me to want to provide a home for my family. But because I never actually faced the pain of my own experience growing up, and how I did not feel safe, and I did not feel secure, and I did not feel like the environment that I was in was supportive of what it was that I felt like I needed, I internalized that, never really processed it, and then I worked overtime to make sure that I provided it for my people. And when I couldn't do it, then I felt like a failure. When I couldn't actually get the home that I was expecting, and we lived in an apartment with four kids in a two-bedroom apartment for over 5 years in this small, cramped, space, I didn't feel like I was fulfilling what was going to put the stamp of approval, I would say, on what I was hoping for. And I think in turn, we often overperform because we're making up for something that we never actually faced. We're making up for a need that has actually never been addressed. So we have decided that the need is the issue, that whatever it is that's calling for our attention, whatever this pain is, has to be set aside, or has to be, pushed away, or doesn't really require that much time, that much energy, that much effort, because we really haven't faced what is driving the need, what is behind our efforts, what's behind the way that we work, what's behind all of our striving. For me, it was striving not just to survive, that was part of it, but it was striving to make up for where I felt like my needs were not met. And I didn't have the language for that. It's not like I had a conscious understanding of that. It was subconscious. It was not something that I was even um, as aware of as I am now. So if I had to do it all over again, I think instead of just focusing so much on fixing the problem, if I paid attention to what I needed, and I actually spent time assessing what was really going on with me, I think it would have been different. Not that I would have stopped looking for a home for my family, but I think I would not have judged myself so harshly if I had taken the time to really examine what was driving me. For most of us, for a lot of us, the accolades, the pursuits, the promotions, the job, the career, the education, the social status. It isn't because we just desire to reflect God and we want to bring him glory. And so we pursue these things in order to point people to Christ. That's not what we're doing. Most of us, if not all of us, are doing it as a way to make up for what we didn't get. And instead of figuring out what we need and actually getting it, we have filled ourselves up with all of these other sources. And what we're missing is at the core of the pain that we are in, and the pain we refuse to face, is the way out. It's really the way out. Pain is not the problem. Pain is the pathway. If only we understood it the way I think God desired for us to understand it. So your striving, your stressing, your strength all look like survival when really what it is silent suffering. So instead of ignoring it, instead of pretending it doesn't exist, my hope is that you can begin to pay attention because there's something that you need. Now, we've talked before about demands. And when there's a new demand, that's when stress occurs. And either we can meet the demand and there's growth, or we don't meet the demand and that's what we consider that stress. Because I was so driven to make sure that my family had a home, I wasn't satisfied with what home we did have. We were in an apartment for, I don't know, maybe 5 or so years, 2 bedroom apartment with 4 kids. It was a situation. But I wasn't satisfied and I wasn't secure in where we were. So, the pursuit to have a home, and I wanted a house, for us to have enough space, for us to have enough room so my children could grow and, all of that. But I didn't enjoy my life at the time because I was so focused on what I needed to do and where I needed to be and where I wasn't, that I was always pursuing and striving and stretching for what was next instead of waiting patiently for the next to come, still working towards it, but not working towards it to the point where I had, sleepless nights and a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear around the circumstances that we were in. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy my life. It doesn't mean we didn't have good experiences or I, never had any joy. But during that season, I kept a brave face. I showed strength. I didn't want to appear to be discontent, but it was very challenging for me to enjoy even the space that I was in, enjoy the life that I was living because I was so desperate to fix the situation, to make it what I wanted it to be. Because to me, it was going to, and at the time, again, I didn't have the language. It wasn't like I was plotting this out. This is all looking back, but I wanted my circumstances to appear a certain way and I wanted to provide for my family and I was so desperate to do so that I didn't even pay attention to what journey I was in. And during that time I experienced a lot of physical symptoms. Brain fog was a huge one. Fatigue was huge. I was dealing with some high cholesterol problems that the doctor had identified, low blood sugar, hormonal imbalances, and of course, pain, chronic, chronic pain. There were days I couldn't get out of bed. There were many days I couldn't play with my children. Most of the days I dragged through the day with barely enough energy just to meet all the expectations. And at the time, my children were very young. So I had very little domestic help. My husband was there. He was helpful, but he worked at the time. He had a full time day job. So he was gone most of the day. So that meant I was home alone with 4 young children, doing my best to provide a home for them in this tiny apartment that we had, to feed them, to make sure they were clean and had clothes, to educate them. I was a home educator, so I was teaching them to read, and I had 2 children who had learning differences, and so learning to read was difficult. um, to provide a sense of play and wonder and enjoyment for them. And it was very challenging because I spent most of my time working really hard at this thing way out there, this level of achievement I was trying to get to, not to impress anyone, not to even show off. It wasn't like that was the issue. It was more so to make up for what I felt like I didn't have. And not knowing that, it robbed me of those years. And I think was a huge contribution to the challenging health symptoms that I was suffering with and dealing with. I did my best to exercise and eat well and, go to the doctor and do all the things they tell you to do, but I also was having heart palpitations. I was also dealing with a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety, and I couldn't get rest, and my body ached all the time. And I never made the connection that there was something that I needed that I was refusing to see. Not because I was being stubborn, I just didn't have the context for it. I didn't even know that that's what it was. I was going to church, I had women in my life who were walking with me, friends. It wasn't like I was living life alone in the sense that I had no one around who could see. And I did have, some friends and some people in my community who would point out, some areas where I might be challenged. But at the time, nobody was helping me to recognize that the pain I was in was actually trying to communicate something powerful. I thought pain needed to just be gone. I needed to get rid of it. I needed to stop it. It was interfering with my life and I wanted it over. I wanted it to stop because I couldn't do what I had imagined I needed to do. I couldn't take care of my children the way I wanted to. I couldn't show up in my life the way that I had hoped because I was always in so much pain. Now, the same can be true not just for physical pain, it can be emotional pain or relational pain. Like I think about sometimes some of the challenges that I was having with some of the relationships in my life, and the pain I was experiencing was because I needed to set boundaries. But I thought that there was something wrong with me. And if I could just be better, if I could just perform more, if I could just produce more activity or show up as a better Christian or pray harder, then that would fix it, that would end it. And maybe I wasn't faithful enough. I didn't pray hard enough. I didn't believe God enough. And that's why I was still experiencing the pain. But can I tell you the truth? The truth is, I needed to pay attention to what the pain was trying to communicate. I said it before and I'm going to say it again. Pain is not the problem. Pain is actually the pathway to the power that you have been praying for. Pain is actually not your problem. Pain is the pathway to the healing that you have been praying for. I prayed and prayed and prayed and cried and read scriptures and spoke verses over myself and asked for friends and changed my diet and did the exercises and drank the water and apple cider vinegar and all the things they tell you to do to fix my pain. And all the while, as I look back and I realize and I recognize that pain was an invitation to draw closer to God in the places that I had need. But there was something in me that told me, and I'm still unpacking what that is, but there was something in me that made me feel inferior, that made me feel less than because I had a need. That I shouldn't have needs, that I should be good, that I should be okay, and that if I had a need, something's wrong with me. Pain is an invitation to pay attention and figure out what you need. It's communication, whether it shows up in your relationships, whether it shows up in your body, whether it's showing up in your finances. It's communicating, it's calling you to, it's inviting you to pay attention. There's an unmet need. And there's nothing wrong with having a need, but that's what I believed. I believed that there was something wrong with me, that I just needed to fix this, that I wasn't doing enough, I wasn't being enough, I wasn't faithful enough. And that's what led me to still have this experience. So as soon as I could fix myself or, fix my faith or work harder or do more, then the pain will go away. When really pain is communication, that there's a missing piece that has to be addressed. And until it is, the pain isn't going to go anywhere. We mask it. We do. We cover over it. We hide it. We push it aside, but it doesn't actually leave. Until we resolve, until we address, until we get what we actually need, the pain isn't going to go anywhere. It might lessen in seasons, or we have dampened it so much that we don't feel it like we used to, but it actually didn't go anywhere. So when I think about needing a home for my family, or the desire that came from that need, because I felt like that wasn't something that I had with confidence as I was growing up, it led me to have this sense that until I get this, I won't be satisfied. Until I get this thing that I want, this outcome that I'm looking for, I won't be satisfied. When really I can find satisfaction whether I get the outcome or not. So we've used strength as a cape. We've used strength as a shield. We've even used strength as a weapon because there's this idea that I have to show up. I have to make sure everything else is taken care of. Everyone else is taken care of. I can never show any weakness. I can never show that I'm in need. And we've relegated strength to a lack of need when that's not what strength actually is. So, where have you ignored what you actually need and called it strength? When was the last time you paid attention to what you actually needed? Healing begins the moment that you stop confusing strength with striving. All the work, all the effort, all the doing that you think is strength is actually strangling you. Your life work is to notice, where have you been showing up looking like the strong one? Where have you performed or produced or protected or provided for somebody else and you didn't actually have it yourself? Write down where you are showing strength and carrying things that were never meant for you. I'll see you next time.